Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 good brothers. Ah ha ha ha! We have our resident waifu hunter and the man who always wishes for snow in Georgia. Good brother Akira.
It's fucking hot!
Amen to that!
Don't I fucking know it?
We have the man who is the man who is the bloodborne of Sean Schemmels. Good brother Jean.
Wow, really? We're going there. Okay.
If we end up invoking Dark Souls early before we go live, then I'm invoking Bloodborne because chaos.
Can't we call him the Elden Ring of Sean Schemmel? I mean, he is that expansive.
No comment. Next we have the man with all the probing questions. Good brother Nephenor.
Can I have my money now?
You are not Indian enough for that. We have the man who is solely responsible for the world shortage of folding chairs. Good brother Slick Rick.
No, Neff is right. We're getting paid for this, right, Mildra?
No.
No.
Really?
Back in the hole.
What's that case of beers that says payment for shades over in the corner?
Get back in the hole. Nobody told you could stand up, Rick.
And lastly, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence. Good brother Xanatrix.
Zadari Enterprises would like to remind you that you can count on Zadari Enterprises, because I, Xanatrix Zadari, can count.
Only to 5.
It still works.
3, sir.
3 ain't enough.
3 ain't enough. I need 5.
But you don't count to 5 for the holy hand grenade.
I was wondering if anyone else got that one.
We'll save that if we end up running into any rabbits in our adventures. Well, aside from Rabbit Sensei, he's fine. I'm not going to explode him because I know there's no way he can be the killer rabbit. The rest of them, well, either they actually are the killer rabbit in past tense, or they weren't, and I already know because they're blown up.
Problem is, we don't have any more. The worms stole all the holy hand grenades.
I can bless new ones.
He is a monk.
And as I've said multiple times, monks have doubled as priests in the past.
As long as you bring the concrete donkeys, we'll be fine.
But let's talk about Nintendo. We haven't clowned on Nintendo yet in this series, and don't get me wrong, I'm not going to do some console war shit because console wars are cringe.
Yes.
I
agree with that because Sorry, go ahead.
As somebody who was right in the middle of console wars and edition wars alike, I hate both of them.
Yeah, I grew up with both a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo. You all can go fuck off.
Oh.
I grew up with neither.
Yeah, you were an Apple boy.
And before that, I was a VIC-20 boy.
Mm-mm.
Damn.
You know, one of these days I'm going to run into somebody who when making were you a Nintendo kid or a Sega kid, they're going to end up saying TurboGrafx-16, and I'll go, you poor bastard.
That's where I, for shits and giggles, go Commodore 64, motherfucker.
Once again, you poor bastard, because if it's off the screen, it doesn't exist. Also, the whole thing of using tapes to play games.
Hey, that's how I learned to hack Frogger.
But obviously, the the household name status of Nintendo, to the point where it's used as where a whole generation used that as a pejorative for gaming consoles, even to this day, cannot be understated. And the spot in history is not under contest. But that's not why we're here. We're here because over the years there's been plenty of attempts to innovate with new and interesting, quote unquote, ways to experience video gaming. And not all of them have been successful. Some of them have been the joke of the industry. And this fixation on innovation is part of what inspired the subject matter today. Hence the title, Nintendo and the Spectre of Innovation.
Sounds like we need Luigi in here.
Well,
Mario!
Yeah.
does anyone have a Game Boy horror?
Negative.
I mean, I could certainly use my custom firmware edition of my 3DS to make one.
Don't worry, we got the Game Gear. We can talk to Dr. Ega, and he'll bring over Luigi.
For about 15
Now-
minutes.
Getting back on the rails here. Now, Nintendo's obsession with innovation has led to some big advancements in gaming. You know, let's not beat around the bush here. They've done a lot of stuff that has actually improved gaming a lot, but when you're constantly innovating, inevitably you're going to come across some misses along with the hits.
Law of
So-
averages.
Yeah, pretty much. And throw in Sturgeon's Law as well while you're at it.
Law of averages on top of Sturgeon's Law, that makes it 5% of everything is good, and 95% of everything is crap at that point. Oh no.
Well, I mean, you look at Nintendo's track record, how far off are we?
I think
Not
actually
too
Sturgeon's
far
Law
off.
may not actually apply to them. They actually have a lot more hits than misses in everything I've seen.
That's true, but it's also a case of, you know, when you have that much innovation, yeah, when it hits, they knock it out of the fucking park. But when they miss, they fail spectacularly.
And
And
a lot
yet,
of
as-
people conveniently forget about the misses.
Well, I think unlike a lot of other entertainment medium, and even Nintendo's competition in Sony and Microsoft, I think unlike their competition and those other places, the reason their poor innovation gets left to the wayside, part of it, a small part of it, I would say a very small minority, is fanboys being fanboys, but fanboys are on all parts of this spectrum, all competitors. I think the primary reason is they don't stop to lament their bad hits. They just go, that sucked. Keep going.
Yeah.
They don't stop.
Yeah, they don't stay in a lull for forever. Like, okay, we're not going to innovate for a while. No, we're like, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else.
And they never pulled a Square Enix where they had to publicly apologize on a press release for a very poor rendition of an MMO.
Although I can guarantee you're not going to see any California studio having the humility to pull that kind of thing if recent events are any indication. Looking at you, the devs who have been coping over Baldur's Gate 3 being a runaway hit.
Yeah. Another aspect of this that I think should be noted is that Nintendo doesn't, unlike a lot of other companies, when Nintendo's innovation flops, they take the cut where it needs to be cut. Because it's been noted that during his life, Satoru Iwata would take pay cuts in order to keep his employees well paid, even if they suffered a financial loss over an innovative flop.
Mm-hmm.
Although,
So it encourages them to keep trying.
yeah. Although we also should note that when people were so afraid that Nintendo was going down the shitter before 2017 and the Switch's runaway hit, they had, what was it, their first fiscal year where they actually had a downturn, and the report from their sales from their sales quarterly call was, "We can keep having these types of downturns for 20 years and still be solvent." It's like, yeah.
I remember that.
Well, I mean, it kind of figures, considering that Nintendo's been around since 1880 something, making Hanafuda playing cards.
I remember.
Yeah. So Nintendo has a very good head on their shoulders when it comes to not resting on their laurels. They always tend to take whatever hits they get on their chin and keep on ticking. This is a Hajime no Ippo, except on crack.
Yeah, pretty much, and that helps them a lot to be able to move things forward. But we still got to look back and acknowledge that, yeah, they've had a few misses along the way, and they need to be we need to be reminded of those. Though if you go back to the early NES days, it's not hard to remember some of the early misses back then.
Yeah, and I will note for a bit of context, when it comes to a lot of the early NES was the Wild West. Nobody really had a concrete idea of what they were doing, and
it led to a lot of stuff.
Yeah, right off the bat, I think the most infamous example comes from a simple quote: "I love the Power Glove. It's so bad."
Ah, The Wizard. Such a funny movie.
Not even just the Power Glove. Most of its accessories were kind of just flat in comparison to the Power Glove.
Oh, the idea of it, because let's not forget, in the 1980s there was that bit of boner regarding the idea of cyberspace. As far as who got the ball rolling, I'd probably say William Gibson with Neuromancer. But you look back at a lot of movies from around that time, and you have cyberspace as this magic in all but name kind of thing going.
Yeah, and you're exactly right about that being from Gibson and Neuromancer. Like, he really popularized that idea. I also love that book. It's a good book.
So yeah, and that led to stuff like the Power Glove and the U-Force even kind of had that.
Wasn't the U-Force made by a third party?
It was made by Borderbund, who the only thing I've known about Borderbund for years is their work on educational games, and in particular the Carmen Sandiego games.
Yeah,
they're pretty decent.
Pretty decent stuff.
You knew that was good when you could get a successful kids game show that, to this day, anyone who has watched it still remembers the theme song.
Well, that's because of
Rockapella.
Exactly.
Not to mention, let's face it, the Rockapella alone through that show influenced modern music so much that how many people do a cappella professionally now and have quoted them being a major influence?
I'm pretty sure we can point to Pentatonics right off the bat, but getting off before we go too far off the rails here. But but that's not to say that there weren't some good innovations during the NES days. I mean, look at the NES Zapper, for example. I mean, even though it wasn't the first light gun out there, it definitely perfected the formula for the most part.
And I'm honestly surprised it managed to survive the controversies that happened in the wake of laser tag, because I think we all know on some level why laser tag died a death.
Yeah, because these days, unless you're in an actual facility for it, you're not playing laser tag.
So, I would like to point out that there is an innovation from the NES days that is probably one of the most famous and maybe a little infamous innovations that was actually a good thing. Hello, Nintendo seal of approval.
Yeah.
Now that actually makes sense.
Was a really good one.
It was a smart idea, though. It had its flaws, but the idea was that because of the slop of shovelware during the 70s and 80s that led to the infamous video game crash in 1983, Nintendo wanted to make sure they didn't repeat that same mistake, so they put a lot of limitations on there. Now, if you dig a little deeper, you'll see that really, the seal of quality was a bunch of bullshit.
Yes.
Like, they were just throwing in everything, but they did implement some rules to restrict developers from releasing a ton of games all at once. You know, you were limited to like 4 games a year per developer, which, okay, good call. Of course, most companies got around that by creating shell companies that they could just throw their other games onto.
But that's not Nintendo's fault.
No, we don't blame Nintendo for that. But it still made a good idea to limit how often games were coming out and keep shovelware from getting in. Something that they wish we had learned. I wish they had kept learning, because that will come back into play later. But of course, if we're going to talk about Nintendo's innovative products, we've got one on the screen from the NES days that we need to talk about.
Yep, Rob.
The Robotic Operating Buddy.
Which
Yeah, I like that thing.
Here's the thing. They used that because part of the reason they made Rob, if you know the history, is that they didn't want the Nintendo Entertainment System to be sold in the electronics section. They wanted it in the toy section because it's meant for kids. So what they did was they created stuff like Rob to justify putting it in the toy section.
Yep.
I mean,
And Rob really is a toy.
It really is, and it does nothing. It was only ever made. There was only ever 2 games made for it, and as someone who's played one of those games, it was actually better without Rob. Because I played Gyromite. I didn't have Rob, but I played Gyromite. You didn't. It was actually easier to play the game without Rob, because the thing is slow as molasses.
and
Did you have your own Gyromite controller?
No. I just plugged in a second controller and used that. The whole idea with Gyromite was that Rob was supposed to be plugged in for the second controller. You put the controller under Rob, and you would have these like spinning tops that you would charge up the spin in the center, and then Rob would move him over to one of 2 sides to hit the respective buttons for the orange and blue pipes that you needed to move. Problem is like I said, it takes forever for him to have the top on the center base, pick it up, move it over to either button, and put it back down. It would take you at least a good solid 20 seconds.
Whereas
For
you could just
one
press
action.
the buttons. Yeah.
Yeah.
And once again, this is where we have to bring in context, because I think people vastly underestimate how much has to go into engineering when it comes to even the most simple of robots. Even the radio controlled stuff you see in BattleBots, which, for the record, has possibly the greatest announcer in any sporting thing ever.
Can't argue with that.
As someone who actually trained in robotics programming, yeah, robots are not easy. Not in the least.
Facts. Because I did too.
One little, as with any kind of programming, one little slip up and the whole thing goes nuts.
Where does the semicolon go, Monk? Where does the semicolon go?
Do I need to bring up the Coder's drinking song?
No.
Yes.
Let's not say we didn't.
Let's not say we didn't. I don't need more programming PTSD.
Hey, I know where to send my programming memes to now.
Yes, please. I love programming memes. They give me catharsis.
There you go.
I think we just found the bane of Zan.
No. Because
I have the Bane of Zan in my collection.
Did you know that I've been doing some training, Shades? I can't hear the jangling anymore. The song doesn't exist in my head. Be that as it may,
Then I guess we need to try harder.
Goose, put your motherfucking head back down.
Never.
I'm with Coops on this one. We'll have to find new ways to get you back.
Oh. This is a merry war that has just begun. But as I was saying, when it comes to programming and robotics, I also have an understanding because I was actually part of the Lego Robotics Club at school. Yes, robotics are very complicated because not only do you have to make sure that every movable part has a logic gate that works, you then have to make sure that all those logic gates are properly programmed.
This is why I don't think you saw commercially viable robots in that sense until I didn't see it until the mid-2000s.
The dogs, the robot dogs.
I remember those. Those were awesome.
And they're very simple to program. They had pre-programmed tracks you'd give them, basically, by pressing buttons.
I know somebody might say that's just a glorified RC car, but same thing applies with the robots you see on BattleBots.
I think we need to clarify that a robot does not mean it is completely 100% autonomous. Mm-hmm. Many robots have to receive some sort of input to function the way that they do. Even one of the more famous videos of more recent internet years of the two builder arm robots wielding katanas and pretending to fight each other, that has an entire mess of code that somebody has to hit enter for it to run that demonstration. Any of the robots from Boston Dynamics, the robot dogs, the standing robots, any of them, are all running on a script that is part of input. And so Rob, as a robot, had very simple inputs. You needed him to hit one button or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But that still took an entire process that was just abysmally slow.
Yeah. And that's if you could send it the input, because much like the zapper, it relied on light tracking. Mm-hmm. You had to flash a light at the screen, which for those of you who were seizure prone probably couldn't play these games because good fucking Christ. You would have to flash the screen a white thing to let Rob know, hey, do this thing. That's why it's got the big eyes on the top. That's how it receives its commands.
Mm-hmm.
My sight's a bitch sometimes.
Well, to be fair, it was an older time. They didn't have the advanced tech that we have today, so they had to work with what they had.
To
be fair.
Exactly. Thank you.
I mean, the Power Glove, getting back to that real quick, relied on sensors that you had to place on top of the TV, not unlike what the original Oculus had to do.
Or the Kinect bar for the Xbox, or even the sensor bar for the Wii.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Things advance with time, so
I would like to note that from what we had of the Power Glove so long ago, now we have HD Rumble with the Joy-Con. You know, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Oh yeah.
And since that's as good of a time to bring up one particular thing I mentioned before we went live. As much of a runaway hit as the Wii was, I think in hindsight, the motion control thing was a slow-acting poison pill.
Oh, it was, especially because eventually that became like the main thing. Everyone was not like, especially I would say first year and a half. Every game that came out, they were focusing so much on using the motion controls instead of trying to make a good game that it just felt so boring or monotonous.
Oh,
and it led to a flood of shovelware too. On top of that,
the other part of the problem was Nintendo. Nintendo has had this thing of being very stingy regarding tech that they consider proprietary. Part of the reason the Switch has been able to do so well is because they got their head out of their ass regarding handing out developer kits. Because with previous generation systems, it was very hard for a third party to get a developer kit, which is what you need to program for that console. These are specialized versions of the console that are, because they're meant for development and not general use, significantly more expensive. I remember back in the day looking at a developer version of a PS2. It was $700. Like Go ahead.
I was gonna say, let's not forget that I believe the PS2 at launch was like $400, maybe even cheaper.
No, I remember getting the PS2 for like 300 because they had to follow up on that on the biggest flex in history with the where their representative just walked up to the podium, said $299 and left.
Yeah. But and then there's the other half of that coin, is that because the Nintendo Wii had become such a runaway hit, now Sony and Microsoft decide, oh, so this motion control thing's doing really good. We need to get in on that shit. Thus, we had the PlayStation Move and the Xbox Kinect. We all know how those turned out, don't we?
The Xbox Kinect makes me more angry because they basically spent several years of Rare's lifetime having them develop exclusively for that.
The Kinect pisses me off for a different reason, but that has to do with privacy and spying.
Oh, yeah.
Sonic Free Riders!
Calm, breathe.
But let's not forget that they tried to put things like a fucking heart monitor in the Kinect.
Which makes no fucking sense.
Oh no, it's to make sure that you're there and still engaged with the game.
It's Microsoft. What do you expect?
You know what's funny about the heart monitor? How many VTubers have we seen use those when they're playing horror games?
I've seen it with non-VTubers.
Yeah, how many streamers in general have been using that? But let's get back to Nintendo. Now, I think we can move on to the next generation, the Super Nintendo, but they really didn't have that many big innovations during that. I mean, you had the Super Scope, which was
They had...
It was
sorry.
It was decent. It had a few good hits there. Had a couple of decent games. You had the Super Game Boy, which was actually really cool.
I loved that thing. That's how I played Link's Awakening after I got it. Every time I played that game. They had an innovation that never reached the floor, and that was the Super Nintendo DD. Which
yeah,
was...
they kept trying to do that whole disc drive thing for like two generations, didn't they?
Yeah, and the disc drive was supposed to allow you to do a lot of cool shit, and then it never did. And then the Super Nintendo, being one of the best RPG machines of that generation. God, so many good RPGs from so many different companies. Everybody remember Breath of Fire? I remember Breath of Fire.
I refuse to let anyone forget Breath of Fire, even if I vehemently disagree with people claiming 3 is the best in that series.
4 is the best. Anyone who says 3 doesn't understand a thing. Be that as it may. But yeah, you're right. The Super Nintendo didn't have too many off-the-wall weird innovations. It was more innovations that were software or firmware related, like Mode 7 graphics. Mode 7 graphics were fucking cool. Anybody who has ever played Super Mario RPG and done the fucking minecart shit knows exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. Or any of the Final Fantasy games that had the fucking, especially 6, when you're in the fucking airships, that's Mode 7. Mode 7 was a fucking godsend.
The only kind of game that I feel was a bad choice for Mode 7 was when they started putting it in hockey games.
That was weird. Why did they do that?
And they all
got their money's worth out of this new graphic.
I think it was more of trend jumping at the time. And the reason why I say it was a bad idea to have Mode 7 in a hockey game is because of how hockey works. Like when you have a you can, in something like football or basketball, you have a gradual back and forth pace that you can build around. You know, one side has possession, then the other side has possession, which you technically have that in hockey, but you have it in a more chaotic sense compared to compared to football or basketball.
It's as chaotic as in soccer.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you probably what I think was the most impressive Mode 7 thing when I first saw it. And that's when you get the airbirds in Tales of Fantasia.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. Like, I thought airship graphics in Final Fantasy VI were good. Jesus.
And as we move on, before we move on to the next big flop, we should also mention another innovation where Nintendo has tried to dabble with console 3D with the Super FX chip.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, it was polygonal as fuck, but it did provide us with some great stuff. And the Super FX 2 gave us stuff like Yoshi's Island, so can't go wrong there.
No.
Although the people who developed the Super FX chip, I do have a bit of a grudge with them, because they were also the people who would eventually give us the PS1 game Alien Resurrection, which lives in my nightmares. And I know that they claimed that early on in testing, people were going through the game with a pistol. I call bullshit. Like, I have stated in the past that there is such a thing as evil game design, and a lot of people think evil game design would be things like gotchas or DLCs or anything like that. That is not what I refer to as evil. Evil game design is when somebody knows that they're making something deliberately unfair, cruel, and punishing from a gameplay perspective, and doing it anyways. Where they
all of Midway with the Mortal Kombat series. Got it.
Where they know what they're doing is messed up. They just want to make you suffer.
Uh-huh.
Again, Midway Mortal Kombat applies here because they deliberately did a thing where the competition, the opponent in Mortal Kombat would get hard enough that you can't beat it, depending on how often you won and how many quarters you put into the arcade cabinet.
That sort of bullshit is standard fare when it comes to arcade games.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 2 did not do that. Street Fighter 2 did not do that.
Motherfucking
Mortal Kombat
Akuma
did. Hey, Akuma was a hidden character that you didn't really ever hit if you were just playing the game normally. You'd have to actually know he was there.
If you win too much, he'd show up and kick your ass.
Yeah.
You'd have to win
Anyway.
like 7 arcade modes in a row. That's
Anyway,
beside the point. This was three fights in. But now we move on to the N64.
Nope. We got to step back a bit.
True.
There was because we got to talk. Yeah, you almost missed one.
No, I didn't miss it. I was just skipping it.
Sorry, that's the whole point of this episode, motherfucker. We got to talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the big red brick known as the Virtual Boy.
As I mentioned before we started, I owned one of these. I never said I played it.
Mm-hmm. I never
Still hurt.
played it. I only played it once when it was at and I'm gonna be dating myself with this reference, at a Funko Land in I think it was the one that was in Roseville, because that's where it was. That's where it was at the time. And I think I got a few minutes in. It was the tennis game, and I was like, no. And given how it's really, really hilarious in hindsight, looking at some of the ways that they advertise. Because if you want some prime cringe, look at video game TV ads in the 90s.
Oh my god.
Coffee, tea, sex.
Oh,
Anytime someone says something like that, my mind instantly goes straight to the Game Boy Advance video.
Now, in this case, I think the ad that Monk's referring to is the Virtual Boy in a Terminator 2-esque post-apocalyptic wasteland, walking amongst this disaster, chasing down a kid and then forcefully it's strapping itself to their face to make them play.
Are we sure it sounds created by Hitler? Because it sounds like the beginning of Kung Fury.
No, but it did save the world in one of the Press Start movies.
Yes, and also killed someone's vision because all that red light.
Yeah. For those who have never experienced this terror, allow me to explain what the Virtual Boy is. First of all, calling it the Virtual Boy is a misnomer because it is not VR in any sense of the word. There was maybe one game that had anything resembling VR. Most of it was just 3D effects with just nothing but black and red.
I'd liken it to that boner that a lot of film studios had in the 2010s about 3D film.
Oh yeah.
Like
I remember those days.
Like for this one, I would say you can probably look up a couple clips on YouTube or AVGN.
Yeah, I was gonna say AVGN will give you the most comprehensive review because he pretty much reviewed every game on there that was available.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically just 3 levels of graphics that were. It was just like multiple levels of graphics that were like 3 different fields of vision stacked on top of each other, and that's how they gave you the illusion of 3D.
Yeah, and because of the limitations of it, they had no room for color. It had to be all black and red, and it's bright light. And again, you're strapping this thing over your eyes directly onto it, which will give you headaches out the ass because of how intense it was.
You go first, Dan. I was going to say and it's no wives' tale, but there's truth in it. You got bright red light shining straight into your eyes. Yeah, that caused damage. Damage.
Strapping a VR to your face? Once again, the more things change, the more they stay the same.
The more they stay the same.
But yeah. So, needless to say, that was probably one of the most infamous flops in Nintendo's history. Especially considering the man behind that created it, Shikasato Itoi. No, not Shikasato Itoi. Gunpei Yokoi. Gunpei Yokoi. Get my names mixed up there. I was thinking Earthbound for some reason.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
Different company.
Yeah, kind of, sort of.
I mean, Square, so.
No, Itoi was Nintendo.
But I'm talking about Earthbound.
Yeah, the developer was Ape, but it was a second party. It was developed through Nintendo.
True.
That being said, Gunpei Yokoi was the one that created it. He created the original Game Boy, which we skipped over that, but there really, again, very little innovation other than the fact that they actually made a portable system that works.
And oh dear God, how durable that console was.
Revived a cruise missile.
And still worked!
Just melted the faceplate a little.
Yeah. But that being said, yeah, the Virtual Boy was his creation, and that was like one of the last big innovations he had before he unfortunately passed away, and not quite the legacy you want to leave behind, unfortunately.
Well, it at least gave Nintendo a direction to eventually make the 3D function for their 3DS. Eventually.
Yeah.
But now we can get on to the N64.
Now, first off, what kind of drugs were the designers on when they came up with the controller?
They weren't on any. This is actually a well-known and well-documented discussion during various interviews. It boils down to they wanted to have an analog stick for, all directional movement, but they wanted to keep a D-pad for people who were more comfortable with it. So they made the controller with both.
That's not the issue that I had with it. It was the way the ergonomics of it. I'll put it that way.
I was going to say, because I get where you're coming from with that, Zam, but at the same time, it's like, why does it look like looks like the top of a trident pointing down at me, and I could stab myself with it if I get too intense into a game?
I'm not saying that the design isn't unorthodox. I'm saying that there's a reason for the design, and it's a fairly good one. You could either hold the controller like you would normally hold a controller, with the left hand on the left pylon, the right hand on the right pylon, controlling all the buttons, or depending on whether you're left-handed or right-handed, but mostly it even fucks lefties this way. Your left would go on the middle stick, and your right would go where the A, B, and C buttons are. And of course, the Z button was on the bottom because you wanted that trigger.
Yeah, I think the intent was to have a multi-purpose controller that could accommodate different styles.
Mm-hmm.
Though the problem is a lot of games weren't going to be taking advantage of this. Plus,
No.
even though it technically has an analog stick, but not exactly.
An 8-gate.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to note one game which utilizes the full controller, Monk. Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire. Type in Wampa Stompa as your name and basically hold every fucking button on that thing and tilt the stick halfway to the left and hold it till you hear a beep, and halfway to the right and hold it until you hear a beep, until you've done that 6 or 7 times and you get all the cheats. I would like to note that if you are actually holding every button as you're supposed to be, you have no fingers for the fucking analog stick and are using your chin. I know this from personal experience.
I think that's the reason they did it as such, as a giant troll move.
Would not surprise me.
I think we found the origin of Zan being a troll.
Oh no. No, that was well before this. That was well before that.
But despite the Trident controller, it did also come with other innovations, most specifically what was involving the back port of the controller, where you could either plug in a memory card, which I believe Nintendo was one of the first to include a memory card system.
Them and PlayStation. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, roughly around the same time, yeah. But the bigger thing, the Rumble Pack.
Yep.
Nintendo was the first one to include a Rumble function in their games, and quite a number of games did use the Rumble Pack.
Even Ocarina of Time.
And they actually used it well, which is even more surprising. They actually put it in places that actually made sense.
Yeah.
They did try to carry the Rumble functionality over into the Game Boy, but I can only think of 2 games that actually used it.
Yeah, not many games did.
Mostly because you're essentially attaching a motor to a Game Boy cartridge. And there may be others, but the only 2 games I can think of that used it were Pokemon Pinball and Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. That was it.
Yeah. Now, the thing to note, though, is that because it was the first of its kind, the Rumble Pack was quite the intense device. I mean, this thing had a heavy rumble to it. It packed a punch.
Mm-hmm.
Later Rumble Packs had a switch to change the levels of rumble, if I remember correctly.
I don't recall ever seeing that.
And that must have been probably a third-party one. But I know that there was some Rumble Packs that had switches on them, probably third-party, that allowed you to vary rumbling, because some people didn't like that heavy rumble, as evidenced by when Sony finally made the DualShock 1 for the PlayStation X. Oh, excuse me, PS1. No, it's the PSX. Fuck y'all. They gave it 2 motors, and each motor was a different intensity to vary your rumble within their games.
Yeah.
In fact, that 2-motor system is still in PlayStation DualShock controllers to this day.
Yeah, the only thing that's really changed was I think by the PS2 generation you started seeing games that gave the option for rumble intensity. I remember the Bouncer kind of had that.
Mm-hmm. But with the N64, a lot of the innovations were once again software or firmware related. Like you had the expansion pack that expanded the RAM of the N64 in order to play some of the more intensive games that were being created for the system.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the big focus on 3D graphics and 3D gameplay with the N64 was a big thing.
Yeah.
Now that being said, you do as we go more and more into 3D, you do start to see a phasing out to a degree of controller gimmicks. There were definitely certain controller gimmicks in third party, but it isn't like the glut of ones you were seeing in the NES era, where there were so many third party gimmicks that whole episodes of AVGN were able to cover it.
I think the one thing that I thought was kind of crappy we didn't get on the American NES was the microphone, because the microphone was
get that.
not initially.
Oh, and the NES we didn't. No.
No, and the microphone on the NES controllers was a big thing. It was super useful for the original Legend of Zelda because by talking or shouting into the microphone, you could freeze Pole's voices.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get that, so Pole's voices were an annoying as hell enemy that we couldn't actually attack the weakness of, basically.
Yeah. No, we didn't get a microphone for Nintendo until the frickin' N64, and only for one game.
Hey, you Pikachu.
Which was barely a game to begin with.
It's a Pikachu Tamagotchi. That's all it fucking is. It's a Pikachu Tamagotchi.
God damn it.
But with that, we move into the next.
Next two, because I think around that time that was when we got the GameCube and the Game Boy Advance.
Both of which are extremely solid consoles.
Yeah.
Yes.
I still have both.
And now even though the GameCube ended up in third place, and I do think that the big reason for that was just the massive install base for the PS2, because there was that massive boom of DVD use in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
At least the GameCube did not end up in fourth place, which ended Sega's console dreams forever.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Dreamcast.
Oof. No, but between the
Coops,
PlayStation
I hear you
dominance,
crying in the back. Don't worry, you still have the GameCube.
Yeah. But between the PlayStation 2's dominance in the marketplace and then Microsoft coming up with the Xbox and all the hype around it, yeah, GameCube was kind of screwed on that regard. There was kind of no way for them to really survive, or at least, thrive in that market. But, and that thus, they didn't really do much innovation on that system on any front. Majority of the innovation for the GameCube mostly tied back to the Game Boy Advance.
Yeah, as far as games that had the Link concept, there were a handful that utilized it. I would say the one game that utilized it to its greatest success, however, was Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles.
I thought you were going to say Four Swords, but Crystal Chronicles, I can also understand why you'd say.
I think it's debatable between those two games specifically, because I think both of them had an equal amount of it. Crystal Chronicles was good for use of the menu system and everything like that, though I think the magic usage was a little finicky with it, and honestly, trying to use the magic that way. That being said, it was still very good. And then Four Swords, being able to use a lot of the functionality and going into the houses on each person, having everyone be able to control everyone through the Game Boy Advance, I think was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you could debate between those two. Either one, I think would not really get too much disagreement.
And
I think,
of course, I had to bring it up given the Hypercube story I shared with you earlier in the week.
Well, I also like to mention back that because it was going on at the same time, they also brought their own version of the Game Boy Pack thing for the GameCube.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, the Game Boy player or the Game Boy Advance player.
Yeah,
Which
there
worked
is-
on it.
There was one particular thing around this time that was a cute idea, but clearly was too expensive to last very long, and that was the e-reader add-on to the Game Boy Advance.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
I still feel bad for it.
Trying to take advantage of the burgeoning the upswell of collectible card packs, especially in Japan with the rise of Yu-Gi-Oh at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Soccer Game Boy Advance, I also want to it's not so much a accessory, so to speak, but it was something that we saw. I remember seeing too many fucking commercials for this, and it died with the Advance. That was the Game Boy Advance video cartridges.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd say that there around that same time you had movies and even some anime on UMD discs for the PSP that did not last.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's largely due to the fact that it was an expense that didn't have enough of a return. If I had to venture a guess as to why.
Well, and especially considering that laptops were getting more affordable and smaller, a lot of people could just get a laptop to do a bunch of things, including watch videos.
Mm-hmm.
So with the advancement in technology across the board, there were certain things that were just never going to fly on consoles. I will note that the Game Boy Advance, due to a little bit of oversight, didn't have a backlight initially. And that was a little bit of a failing that led to later versions getting a backlight and us also getting the first folding clamshell handheld, the Game Boy Advance SP.
Mm-hmm.
Which...
That was a good one. That was the one I had, and oh dear God, did that thing get used to hell? And it was great.
That design is what had single-handedly carried the designs for most of the handhelds following it until 2017 when we hit the Switch, which is a hybrid handheld.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But that whole folding gimmick, people made a big deal about that in cell phones, and I think the rest of us were like, where the fuck have you people been?
Not to mention, folding cell phones is kind of dumb. It's really easy to damage those screens.
Yeah. Then again, the people who would buy that kind of thing are the same people who would be dumb enough to damage their own screens and then try and get it repaired, and then fail at it.
Yeah. But then we get to the Wii.
Like I said earlier, the Wii was a bit of a poison pill, because one thing there was, and the big reason I say that, because when I bring this up, a lot of people go, "How can you say it was a poison pill?" I mean, the Wii was printing money in the late 2000s. This is true. The games attached to the Wii weren't getting that same level of success because it hyper focused on the casual audience. And the problem with the casual audience is that they are going to be incredibly flighty. In other words, they're not going to stick around.
Yo, motherfucker, whoosh!
Yeah, damn it.
But
how many games, like hardcore games or stuff for the non-casual audience, were there on the Wii?
let's not forget the Conduit, the game that spawned the meme about has anyone ever gone as far as to been... I'm not going to continue. Everybody knows that meme, though, don't they? Right?
The Conduit
Yes,
was an interesting experiment, and truth be told, with both the GameCube and the Wii, the family-friendly reputation that Nintendo has had, especially in light of what else was going on in the industry, was a double-edged sword.
I would like to note that one of the earliest titles for the Wii was Red Steel, though.
Which Red Steel was all right.
Its sequel is even better.
Yeah. In part because the idea of full on samurai cowboy is something that is always going to get my attention.
And the other part because you aren't quite as quote unquote on rails as you were in Red Steel 1. Red Steel 1 was a arena to arena sort of affair, I guess is the best way to put it.
Both games were fairly arcadey.
Mm-hmm.
2 I think has the advantage of the fact that an easy way to make your game not age is having a strong art style.
Oh yeah, Red Steel 2 is great art style. There's a reason I still own the disc even though I don't own a Wii anymore.
Mm-hmm. And of course, when we're talking about I'd be remiss if I did not bring up Operation Rainfall, the three games that Nintendo attempted to bury, and as far as a U.S. release, and only saw the light of day after a massive groundswell of support. And one of them has become one of their mainstay franchises since. So who has the last laugh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You could say what you want about Pandora's box
Tower.
and or Pandora's Tower and Last Call, but it's undeniable the now massive success that the Xenoblade Chronicles franchise has created from that campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now they're really feeling it.
What a bunch of jokers.
Well, it's
worry,
Ryan
it's-
time.
I want to punch
That
him.
doesn't even fit in context, Rick.
Yeah! At least mine had mine work, you fuckhead.
John, can I Dave him?
David,
Here, allow me, Dave!
Yeah.
You might have deserved that.
boo this man.
But the
I've been chatting with Tita long before this, so I don't care.
That explains so much.
the thing, and there were one of the big things that ends up causing the death of a lot of controller gimmicks or the like is a lack of things to support them. And to use an example, let's consider the Wii Zapper. This frame that almost made it look like the world's ugliest SMG, and I've seen Keltec SMGs, so that's saying something. But
They're
I
not
can
high
only
point.
think of 2 games that really supported it.
Well, it was not even an innovation. It was an accessory. It was literally just a plastic shell that you stuck the Wiimote and nunchuck onto and just held it like that. And it was very poorly designed. I owned the damn thing. It was impossible to hold that thing.
I'm going to quote an old colleague of yours, Shades. Spazmaster and his up pops. Like, there was a reason in his old videos, whenever he did stuff with Wii, he had a segment called useless fucking pieces of plastic, because 90% of them were.
Yeah.
Like, I remember the only ones I can think of was Link's crossbow training, which was how Linkle was introduced into the canon. And I think Resident Evil 4's Wii version had some compatibility with it, but nobody fucking used it.
I know
Yeah.
some people who tried using it with, I believe the Wii had a variation of Call of Duty or something along those lines, like a port of it.
We have Black Ops.
Okay, yeah. They had that and they tried using that. They somehow made it to work, but it still wasn't, I don't think it was meant for that.
No, this is a problem that the problem that I have with motion controls, whether it be with the Wii or even with modern motion controls in VR gaming, is that the kind of games you can use with that system are very limited and very bottlenecked. Because let me ask you this: could you honestly see a role-playing game being done effectively with motion controls?
Is this where I point at the last story?
And what else? I know we could bring up the last story in Pandora's Tower, but the issue is, what else you got?
The other
Bear in
Crystal
mind,
Chronicles
those were the
games
two
on-
games that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let's bear in mind those two games did not survive Project Brain past Project Rainfall, which probably means something. And honestly, with most RPGs, you can only, unless it's an action RPG, all you're doing is pointing at the screen and pushing a button.
And that's just one genre. When it comes to, say, strategy games, doing motion controls with that would die a death.
Yeah, but like I'm like going back to the RPG one for a second. Like I had a Skyward Sword, and oh dear God, the controls for that was bullshit. To the point that
That's more
they
of an
weren't.
adventure game. That's more of an adventure game than it was an RPG.
It's not an RPG.
that-
It's an action adventure.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Wii Motion Plus was
The Wii Motion Plus is perfect. The issue that I always saw, and I actually bought the Wii Motion Plus and Skyward Sword on release. I had a normal Wii remote and a normal nunchuck, and I had to put on that giant condom to make sure that the Wii Motion Plus would stay connected to the bottom of the Wii remote. The issue I found to anyone who ever told me they had control issues with Skyward Sword was they were either sitting too close to their televisions or had put the bar on top of the television, which I found did not work very well with Wii Motion Plus. But if you put it under, like one of the two settings that it said you should do, it worked just fine when you were about 8 to 10 feet away from the TV, and the bar was underneath the TV instead of on top of it. It worked just fine. I fixed 7 to 8 friends' issues that way.
and that's all well and good, but that still does lead to mean there was an issue because you had to be in a specific setup for it to work properly.
Well, the thing is, if
couldn't.
you go ahead, Shades.
I was going to add, some people might have had, even by this point, people were already having flat screens hanging off the walls. If they didn't have a place to put the sensor bar underneath the TV, that kind of left them in a bit of a problem.
It did, but I would like to note that in the actual user owner manual of the Wii, it states that the sensor bar works best either on top of or under, and you should try both, and at a distance of 8 to 12 feet. This was a limitation already known as part of the hardware.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've talked a lot about hardware innovations, but this is where I want to get into this idea that in order to introduce a new entry, that it has to be doing some big innovation, which is admirable only to a point. So and I'm using this as a glorified way for me to say, get your shit together when it comes to Paper Mario, because the last, don't you're not the only one in pain. Let's consider the Paper Mario games that have been released thus far, and I'm going to pull a flutter just to make sure I have the list in order and I don't skip anything. And that, hang on.
In the Nintendo 64,
So
we have
we have we have the fir- we have the original. We had two. We have the Thousand-Year Door. I think those three could be considered a holy trinity.
Stop. There was no Paper
Hold on,
Mario.
what?
2000 Year Door was the sequel.
Yeah, what? Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking on that part. Sorry. But with those two, you have the combat system that was introduced, which was a decent one that's used in that is built around rhythm.
Grease.
I would agree with that. I played it.
It's
I liked
definitely it's definitely the darkest and in some cases most self-aware of the series. But I feel like the departures that it did ended up creating this problem that it's had since, because then we had Sticker Star.
And now
When will
the
the
tears.
pain end?
For anyone who wants to know what Sticker Star is like, just go to Chugga Conroy's channel and start watching his series about why he hates Sticker Star, which he hasn't finished yet, but you'll get it by the end of the second video.
The problem with the gimmick in Sticker Star, the titular stickers, was that it was so much busy work.
Inventory management, yeah.
And I know some people say, don't you have to do a bunch of inventory management when playing an ARPG? Yeah, but there's still a healthy. But the thing is, I want to do that inventory management to optimize. I don't have to. Obviously, obviously in higher difficulties you have to, but that's getting into the weeds.
Not to mention that Sticker Star isn't really an ARPG.
No,
It's just an RPG.
It wants to be turn based. A lot of highlights like special moves, badges, and the like. It was trying to reinvent the wheel when it didn't have to. And there was also then a few years later Color Splash.
There it is, Sticker Star, but it still kind of sucked.
But once again, and then more recently we have the Origami King, which was, I'm not going to say it was as bad as Sticker Star, but it was damn close.
It wasn't bad, but it was just a case of it taking baby steps. Like, it was giving us what we wanted somewhat, but it was still trying to do its own thing, and it did it poorly.
The whole buying coins thing was a bit contentious, but it's the fact that in the course of 4 games in what's supposed to be a series, they ended up vastly changing the gameplay loop to the point of absurdity. And whenever I bring this kind of thing up, somebody inevitably says, "How come I'm not as harsh about the way Final Fantasy constantly changes?"
Is Final Fantasy? We've talked about this a million fucking times.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy never established a baseline. Every game was different in some way or another, big or small.
And the problem here is with Paper Mario and Thousand-Year Door, a baseline was established.
And then that baseline was promptly given to the rest of the Mario and Luigi series.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if we're going to talk about positive innovation within a series, Monk, the Mario and Luigi series had it in spades all the way up to Dream Team, which is unfortunately the last game.
I will give
Recipe South Dream.
I will give it credit for. I'd say the Mario and Luigi games helped with the current status that Bowser has in the canon of being the villain, but the lesser evil, I guess.
That's because Bowsette. Everyone knows it.
No, this was happening before Bowsette.
This was long before.
We're talking about Bowletta, aka Cackletta.
Yeah.
Then again, I forget his name, but in Bowser's side story, there. Oh, now I remember. It's Fawful. How could I not talk about Fawful? Fawful, I look at as a endurance test for a writer, i.e., how much ammo can we get out of one joke? That joke being English.
Except when you're translating into English, you can't really use English. So they gave him a ton of food anecdotes for everything. And it will the one line that sticks with everybody as the meme is the mustard of your doom.
You okay there, bud?
That's how memorable it is. It's still funny to this day.
Like I said, even if we're just doing food jokes, it's still an endurance test.
Love Fawful. Fawful's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Very.
But there is one series that has been thrown by the wayside because of this obsession with innovation. I had to bring up Paper Mario because of the fact that it keeps trying to throw shit at the wall regarding a design gimmick. Because I think the only thing people want is just something with the gameplay loop of 1,000-Year Door. But this was where I have to bring up F-Zero.
Has anybody played an F-Zero game since GX?
No.
I played all of them.
Uh-huh. GX is the last one. It was on the
And the thing is, like, Nintendo really can't use the argument of trying to be creative, or at least like the story part, even though I don't think that many people pay attention to the story, because
now, if you want to pay attention, go ahead.
Because I'm sorry, what Nintendo racing franchise is going on strong today and has no story whatsoever?
Mario Kart.
Yeah, so I can see why they don't want in-house competition between that. Still, though, I'm sorry, it's been over a decade and a half.
The idea of, oh, we don't want to compete with ourselves, I find ridiculous. And here's my counter argument. Codemasters was developing both F1 and Dirt at the same time.
Yeah, and you're not really competing with yourself because those are two different games.
Yeah,
they're both racing games, but they're both different types.
F-Zero, the only thing that they have in common is being arcadey racers. F-Zero is faster and far, far, far less forgiving. Like, people talk about Mario Kart being the game that ends friendships.
No.
That's Mario Party.
No. You play me on F-Zero GX and I will fucking kill you with the side dashes.
Or if the track itself doesn't kill you.
Track's killing me? Never. I will fucking kill you first.
I'm talking in general, because as I said, F-Zero is not very forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
But Miyamoto had claimed that ever since GX he had no new ideas for an F-Zero game. I find that ridiculous.
Especially considering that there are indies out there that have somewhat replicated the feel of F-Zero GX, like Anti-Gravitator.
Mm-hmm. And in the same vein, we have successors to Wipeout in the form of Ballistic NG and Redout.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Redout 2 is fucking great, as I predicted it was going to be. But with it, like if you want an easy answer, and I think I said this when we did the racing games episode, is just it's called F-Zero, so just steal some notes from F1. You know, have an F-Zero game that does something akin to the speed and grip builds that you see in Need for Speed. This idea that there's, I've mentioned this before, but it always annoys me when people say there's nothing new you can do with a racing game because you're still going around tracks.
If you think that you can take your skills from Gran Turismo and take them to Assetto Corsa, you're fucking delusional. You are fucking delusional. Don't miss me with that shit. Fucking Christ.
And if that was the case, why is it that people have very, very fond memories of things like Hot Pursuit and Most Wanted?
Dude, Most Wanted was one of the best Need for Speed games ever. Fuck.
Oh.
I'm not talking about the one all the way back during the 7th gen. 6th gen.
I don't count that remake because that was made by Criterion, not Black Box. And I like Criterion, I liked Burnout, but a lot of the people who made that what it is were long since out of the company by then. And when it comes to when it comes to F-Zero, the idea that they have to put in some sort of gimmick is honestly a case of not reading the room.
Well,
because I guarantee you, most of the people who would want an F-Zero game or want a Star Fox game, because this has also gotten that treatment after Zero, don't want some new gimmick. They just want a refined version of what came before.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
to reinvent the wheel.
If you look at the progression from F-Zero to F-Zero X to F-Zero GX, the only thing they really added was higher speed, even trickier courses, the boost bar being your health instead of just three boosts you get after the first lap, and the ability to attack directly rather than just kind of shouldering people into the side of the course.
And
those are all very small things.
as far as the idea you can't do anything new with a racing game, did anyone ever play that student project Nitronic Rush?
Yes.
I played a little bit of it.
Might have. I don't remember.
Yeah, that was a survival racing game that was done by some students at DigiPen.
Mm-hmm. It was fun.
It was fun. It in a roundabout way kind of reminded me of obviously San Francisco Rush and Outrun, but also to a degree Spy Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea that you couldn't do anything new with it, why not actually have a team set up the way you have in an F1 game for F-Zero? There, I've solved your innovation issue.
I think if I had to make a guess, I think the real reason is racing games in the arcade have not been very popular in recent years, and F-Zero was an arcade racer first and foremost. Home console sales were not what they were focused on. And while F-Zero GX was very popular in an arcade for a racing game of its time, it still wasn't as popular as other arcade games in general, and they didn't really give a shit about the GameCube sales for F-Zero GX. I think it was just a matter of, this really isn't doing anything for our company anymore, so shelve it for now.
And as far as Star Fox Zero, I really wanted to like Star Fox Zero, and my first experience with it was at the Nintendo booth at E3 the one year that I went. However, the the insistence on using that convoluted control scheme on the Wii U was a problem.
Which I think should lead us right into discussing
Nope.
that particular.
We are missing the gap between the Wii and the Wii U, that being the DS and 3DS. Because the DS was the first innovation of the dual screen and touchscreen formats for handhelds.
That is
along
true.
with other things. I still actually have my DS Lite too.
I still have a couple of those. Yeah. Let's see.
It had the ability to dual load both GBA games and the titular Nintendo DS games. And like I said, one of those screens was a touchscreen. The bottom screen was a touchscreen. It was a very innovative console for the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not to mention, it was also like for the time, especially. I remember it with the 3DS. Maybe it was with the I know DSi for sure. Maybe DS Lite, but it was also like the first one, like game console that allowed you to use the internet in some way.
The DS could do that from time to time, I believe. Or no, it was I think the DSi probably.
Although
if I can find out where I put my DS.
Although it's only been until the Switch that Nintendo has gotten on board when it comes to, I'd say not even that, when it comes to having decent networking for online multiplayer.
No, the 3DS had some very decent networking for online multiplayer, but that's because all of the servers were third party. Because the 3DS was where you could play Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate with your friends across the world.
I'm mainly using this to clown on the whole friend code thing that they were pushing around that time.
I get you. But that's something we could bring up for the 3DS, the Street Pass feature. Because
What else?
the way they brought that in, it was very selective with the games, at least the ones I had, on which one had it, but you pass by the right people. Oh, it was a fun challenge.
Yeah, the Street Pass feature was pretty innovative, but it didn't really take off in a lot of the other parts of the world. Because unlike Japan, which is very close together, and people were taking their handhelds with them everywhere, so you'd get street passes from people on the subway, people on the street, people in your workplace. Other places in the world are built more expansive, and people don't carry their handhelds everywhere.
I would agree with you on that, but I had mine throughout high school, and there was actually plenty of people who had it. So I would say it depends on the situation you're in.
I have a good for you.
I think it's a case of Rick's not wrong, but Zan has got the main point is it's a lot more limited as opposed to Japan where everybody's doing it. You could literally go anywhere and have tons of street passes, whereas here in America you'd be limited to select venues, high schools, conventions, that's about it.
Well, my last question was going to be, how often did you go to Walmart or McDonald's or any of these other big name places?
Frequently, because they were all within like 10 minutes of walking.
Nintendo Land and the Street Pass relays. The Street Pass relays were servers where people who passed by a relay at any point were loaded. And when you passed by, you'd get like the 8 most recent people who had come past that relay at any point. And if there hadn't been a lot of people recently, it would shuffle through them on these servers. So that's the big one that did a lot of things for a lot of people. Yes, there are certain, as you pointed out and as John pointed out, certain smaller venues, limited venues, schools, conventions, etc., where you would get a lot of street passes organically. But the big thing that a lot of people used in the States especially, and in Canada for that matter, were the Street Pass relays. And what really pissed people off was when in 2018, Nintendo shut down the Street Pass relays because a lot of people were using a neat little trick that you could set up on your home router called Home Pass that would allow you to basically turn your own router into a Street Pass relay, so you'd never have to go outside to get Street Passes. And when the servers went down, Home Pass stopped working.
Mm-hmm. Now, I will note that both the DS and the 3DS were very good very good handheld systems for RPG fans.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I will always state that anybody who is a fan of RPGs needs to at least once try out Radiant Historia.
Or the 3DS version, Radiant Historia Perfect Chronology, which I have right here.
Yeah.
I need to play that. That is on my list.
And
the Bravely games are on it.
Bravely, my thing.
Fantasy Life is on it. You've got games like I said, the Mario and Luigi Dream Team. Lesser known RPGs like Alliance Alive.
How could I forget about Super Robot Wars OG?
On the DS.
Yep.
Well, actually, technically technically OG 1 and 2 were ported to the GBA, but they were marketed so terribly they sold like shit in the US.
Yeah.
Then we got Super Robot Wars OG Endless Frontier on the DS. My favorite game for the DS, I might add, even more so than Chrono Trigger DS. Mm-hmm. And then we didn't get the fucking sequel because again, terrible poor marketing, and we didn't get the sales numbers required. I'm gonna say it now. Bandai Namco, Super Robot Wars 30 has proven we want these games. Give me the older games now.
That's one of those annoying things of barely marketing a game and then pulling a surprise Pikachu face when it sells like shit because you barely advertised it.
I think the big thing that proved, and this, I'm just going to use this aside for Super Robot Wars because I have to. It is my personal evangelism. Join the Church of Super Robots today. VX and T were all sold in English on the Southeast Asian market on consoles that didn't have region locks. I think as a way for Bandai Namco to sneakily go, exactly how much do the Kaigai Niki really want this? And then when they saw that everybody in the US that loves these games was ordering them till they were sold out every time there was a new pressing, they're like, Super Robot Wars 30... 30th generation. What do we have lined up for that? All of these. Are we going to have any licensing issues with those in the US? No. What's our marketing campaign like? And thus we got the magnificence that was Super Robot Wars 30, and the proof that we needed those games. Yes, inject the Super Robot straight in my blood, please.
This has been Xanatrix's fanboy rants of the day.
Remember, people, Zadari Enterprises, first and foremost, is a super robot company! Join R&D today so I can turn you into red mist whenever I feel... so that you can be a proud pilot of our prototypes. Yes, that one. What? No, Legal. Fuck off! I don't need you to bug me again today, Legal!
Anyone else want popcorn?
Here, pass it down.
Go ahead, Hunk. I've got to deal with Legal now.
But even with
on that note, I'm going hell now. I got work to do in a couple minutes.
All right, stay frosty, man.
Later, guys.
But
Later.
Now, when it came to stuff like F-Zero or Star Fox, true. I think I end up having the last laugh on those fronts because, fans have carried that torch. There is a game that's been in early access for a good amount of time called X Zodiac, and if you look at X Zodiac, it is very much channeling old school Star Fox.
All I want is Star Fox 64, but refined. Can I just have that, please?
And X Zodiac comes across like Star Fox 2.
A game that we only got on the SNES Mini.
Yeah, it's very much a 90s Star Fox. And if you look at the thing on Steam, and full disclosure, I did back it when it was on Kickstarter. Let me if Discord will actually cooperate with me, because it's being really slow right now.
Is it just me, or is everybody, upon multiple mentions of Star Fox, suddenly hearing the Corneria theme from Zone 1 in Star Fox for the SNES?
Oh yeah.
Check GeekWatch. You will see the Steam page for X Zodiac, and you not only have the vibe of Star Fox, but also a bit of Space Harrier.
Ooh, I love the Space Harrier.
But just looking at the trailer that's on the Steam page, I think you can see why I speak so highly of it, especially since it's only like $10.
And it is, of course, Mode 7 all the way. Oh yeah, that was something I forgot to mention when we brought up Mode 7. All of fucking Star Fox.
And in the same vein, truth be told, it could be argued that Star Fox peaked with Assault.
It did.
It did.
I don't care if Star Fox peaked with Assault. I just want more. You don't need to do anything new. Just give me more.
Well, that's kind of what I've been getting at. This idea that the wheel needs to be reinvented is an annoyance. Because with a lot of games in these libraries, you don't even need to reinvent the wheel as much. Just refine what's already there. Let's consider, for instance, Bloodstained. A lot of what's in Bloodstained was already present in games like Aria of Sorrow. Just a few new bells and whistles added. In the case of a lot of the indie games that are doing successors, they're not trying to reinvent the idea, just bring a familiar gameplay loop but putting their own spin on things. This idea of needing to innovate is a double-edged sword. It can create new and interesting, brave new world kind of things. But at the same time, this idea that you have to do it can result in a different form of design by gospel. Because I do think this idea of, well, we need to do something innovative in order for it to work, that is a form of design by gospel.
It is. The gospel is innovation.
Mm-hmm. And let's consider how much of a runaway hit Smash Brothers Ultimate was versus the controversies that happened with Brawl. Just as one example.
What specific controversies were you thinking of with Brawl?
The slowing down of it is the big one.
The one where everything was slowed. Yeah.
Slowing as well as the fact that things weren't as responsive. Now, could it be argued that Melee was too fast? I don't know about that. You should be expecting chaos when you're doing a party fighter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they even Brawl even tried to Brawl seemed like to be adamant about trying to prevent it from being used competitively by even adding in like an occasional trip function where you could literally just out of nowhere trip over yourself.
And Luigi had the highest incidence. But his trip also did damage.
Except at the same time, they have Meta Knight being better than everything.
Just why he ended up being banned at tournaments.
Monk, tires don't exits. Tears don't exist is still one of my favorite memes to quote.
But, and of course, they spent so much time making a big damn deal about the Subspace Emissary story.
Which was a good story.
Yeah, that's not the kind of thing that is the reason why people jump onto a game like this.
Sure.
And then of course we get Ultimate, which decided to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, go with a faster approach. And I'd say the only problem that Ultimate has these days is, well, the Smash community, but that's not Nintendo's fault.
I will no. There's one other issue that Ultimate has, Monk. It's in the name. They're not only did they say everyone is here and then add even more people to the very end of it with all of the additional fighters. There's nowhere to go from there.
Especially since the whole adding in Mii's so that people could make custom fighters, which was a way for them to sneak in characters that they didn't want to give full on move sets. Hi, Sans.
But the big problem that Smash Bros has at this point is the fact that the most recent game was named Ultimate. And I can understand why they named it Ultimate. But that means that you've given yourself a hard stopping point. Which, I'm going to be fair, Sakurai deserves that.
Yeah.
That man worked himself near to death on some of the Smash Brothers stuff. Now he can focus on other things he loves to do in HAL Laboratories, especially like Kirby games, which have been fantastic. So maybe we don't need another Smash Brothers. Or maybe this Smash Brothers will get the GTA 5 treatment from Nintendo.
or the Skyrim treatment where they just keep porting it.
I don't know which is the worst. I don't know which is the worst offender: the Skyrim port, which forces you to buy it over and over again, or the GTA 5 ports, which force you to buy them over and over again, and then buy your Shark cards all over again on GTA Online to get all your stuff back. Oh, by the way, they removed 200 and something cars from the game recently, so you can't buy them in online anymore. But that's for a different day. We're not discussing Rockstar.
And truth be told, I don't have any plans to do an episode solely on Rockstar, because it would just if I do that, then it's just revisiting the Unholy Quartet.
We won't talk about Rockstar. Not today.
That being said,
now we can move to the Wii U.
yeah. And I think there were several significant problems that I think doomed the Wii U. One of them was the default controller.
The gamepad?
Yeah.
So there's a reason I wanted to get to the DS and the 3DS before we got to the Wii U, and that's because the Wii U is the ultimate evolution of those two handhelds, because you had two screens. Your TV and the gamepad, and the gamepad was also a touch control.
I think the problem was the thing was just way too big and a bit unwieldy.
Yeah.
And yet we still saw players like Sorian Dash playing the hell out of the Wonderful 101 on that, because you have to look at the second screen on the gamepad to do certain parts of the game.
That's why I was a little bit curious when it was announced when we got the PC version of the Wonderful 101, because I was having a hard time fathoming not using the dual screen setup for that.
And then they just decided to do picture-in-picture.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they had to
Sort-
kickstart the whole thing to re-engineer a lot of that.
It sort of worked.
It worked really well. I love the Wonderful 101 remake. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game, but I didn't really like the picture in type of thing. Like, I think it was a bit too small for my eyes.
Get a bigger screen. I mean, there's a solution.
I mean, that was my thing, though. I didn't have a bigger screen.
I know. That's the solution.
Yeah.
I use a TV for my primary screen, so it's a 50-inch TV, so I don't gotta worry about shit. But the Wii U, yes, the first might have been the gamepad, but I think that there's something even before that, and that's the fact that it's called the Wii U.
Yeah, the name kind of makes it sound like it's an attachment or an accessory or an addition to the Wii and not its own separate console.
Yeah, I cannot count the amount of times I was in a GameStop, people asking for the Wii U to give to their to touch their Wii, and then they're quoted, a $399 price tag. They're like, but it's just a tablet controller, and it's like, no, the Wii U is an entirely new console. It's like that doesn't make any sense. And yes, since the Wii had the largest casual install base, you had a lot of people coming in with that particular issue.
This is why I keep warning people when it comes to doing this sort of appealing to the casual audience, because fashion is fleeting. And I think with what's happened with the Switch, that lesson has been learned.
Well, when we get to the Switch, I'll give my thoughts on that. I think the third issue with the Wii U is, frankly, I think its dev kit thing was the worst that Nintendo had ever done. That their tight-fisted clutch on dev kits made sure that the third-party support for the Wii U was abysmal.
And Nintendo's been very stingy when it comes to their dev kits over the years.
Yeah.
In fact,
Like, I remember
that was one of the reasons why their competitors were able to have a leg up, because they were more willing to play ball with developers.
I remember when the Wii U was first getting announced, like, they made a big deal about how EA was going to work very closely with Nintendo for it. And then the system came out, and yeah, we saw how that worked out. Most of the games on the Wii U that EA produced were shit.
Shovelware.
I'd say if Ubisoft at least tried. I realize what I'm saying, given how I've clowned on Ubisoft over the years, but they at least made efforts.
Scamming with faint phrases, Monk.
Yeah, same thing goes with Rockstar. It's just that the attempt that they made is the one that's not, I won't call the black sheep, but definitely not the most fondly remembered entry in the Batman Arkham games. That being Origins.
You talking about Rocksteady?
Yeah.
Okay. Origins isn't even technically considered part of the rest of the Arkham series. Like, a lot of the times Rocksteady will refer to the Arkham Trilogy, meaning Asylum, City, and Night.
In other words, trying to memory hole it.
No, they mention Arkham Origins as an origin story that is separate.
Kind of sounds like trying to play both hands.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I think Rocksteady can get away with it, considering how good City is. I won't talk about Night. That's a different story. It's mixed. But the I think the one thing that I really liked about the Wii U is that Capcom continued to put Monster Hunter out on it. Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate was on both the 3DS and the Wii U.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, 3 Ultimate was on the Wii U as well. I remember playing, and the Wii U was actually very robust with its internet on the few games that used it, including Monster Hunter. Because I remember playing lots of Monster Hunter with my friends on my Wii U when I was not in the same state as them. I also remember later selling my Wii U. I have to tell you how much I kept it.
Yeah. And the main reason that I still have mine is because there is still one game left that has not been converted over. And that's Xenoblade Chronicles X.
Dolphin is a good name. I love the name Dolphin.
Same here.
Dolphins are nice animals.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, I am very sure about that. They're so nice. They want to have relations with humans. It's just that humans don't want to have relations back.
I am not touching that.
Yeah,
Hey,
I'm stepping back. I'm done.
I mean, everybody knows about the infamous Dolphin House, don't they? That science experiment from like the 70s.
Wow, that took a turn. Hey, yo!
I will bring you down with me, all of you. But I can understand Xenoblade Chronicles X. I think the issue I had with Xenoblade Chronicles X is it was just too empty. They did not utilize their world well enough in that one.
That I can go with. It's definitely, you know how we've talked about the issues that can happen with open world.
Yeah.
That is definitely a case of that.
I haven't gotten very far in Atlas Fallen yet, but I can say that what I have gotten through, they utilize their open world better than Forspoken did. But that's for a monastic therapy way later. I think we've harped on the Wii U enough at this point. It had a lot of issues, and most are already known by people. And so with that, we move to the most modern outing from our innovative company of Nintendo, the hybrid console handheld known as the Nintendo Switch. This thing, like you said, you realize that having just too large of a casual install base is a bad idea. Well, much like how this is a hybrid console, it has a hybrid install base. You have a bunch of really hardcore Nintendo fans. I would count, I think, all of us here under that umbrella.
Easily.
Who love the Nintendo Switch for a bunch of the super fantastic first-party games. I don't think I need to point any further than the launch title Breath of the Wild and its erstwhile sequel this year, Tears of the Kingdom, or, Super Mario Odyssey, which I still love playing to this day because holy shit, the trick jumping in that game is fucking insane.
John?
Yeah?
The power of Nintendo compels you.
But
Hello!
but you've got a lot of things that were pulled up from previous consoles. I got new ways to play fucking No More Heroes 1 and 2. We won't talk about No More Heroes 3.
I just started that game, actually.
I'm sorry. It is a soulless, empty doll of what they think No More Heroes should be, rather than being No More Heroes. Combat's still good, though. It's just, it's way too self-aware and self-referential. But that's for another discussion at some other point. Mm-hmm. They've brought over a ton of games that people have been happy to have, that were on previous consoles. Yes, you had to pay for them again because, well, Nintendo likes their money. But the fact that the option is there is fundamentally fantastic. They've also introduced not one, but two Xenoblade Chronicles games,
even if one of them keeps pissing off the Puritans, to which we say, fuck them.
What, 3's pissing people off, or is it Torn of the Golden Country? Maybe it's 2. I don't know.
Yeah. The fainting couch had had come up regarding regarding character designs once again.
Oh, because of Dahlia. Yeah, I remember now.
Mm-hmm.
Did they not realize that most of these characters are designed by Japanese artists who design characters like that for a living? Huh. Anyway,
people don't like to listen.
Well, people also seem to be extremely xenophobic, specifically when it comes to East Asia, and I don't know why. But we won't get into that.
Yeah.
There have been a ton of lesser known, smaller games that have been sleeper hits on the Switch. I mean, if I just look at my Switch games alone, let's look here. I have quite a few. But things that people didn't know if they were going to be good. Like, nobody knew how a platinum action game was going to do on the Switch that wasn't Bayonetta, but Astral Chain was magnificent.
Oh yeah, that shit was fire.
Dragon March for Death is a game that I recommend anyone and everyone play.
Especially since it's on both Switch and it's on PC, so less excuse.
Yep. Obviously, if we're talking big games, Kirby's here.
But the key, one of the key things that I mentioned before is it is ridiculously easy to get a Steam dev kit.
Yep.
And much like how Nintendo has had a reputation for years of not being all that willing to play ball. In fact, some people going as far as to compare them to Disney,
which makes no sense.
In terms of always wanting a in terms of being unwilling to completely play ball with others, I can understand that. Consider how Disney had the opportunity to do a Harry Potter wing for their theme parks and lost it because they wanted to do an American take on Harry Potter.
Okay. I remember that. I sometimes choose not to. Thanks for reminding me, Monk.
You're welcome.
Thanks. I hate it.
The point. I do think the Disney comparison was a bit extreme, but they did have that reputation of throwing their weight around. Arguably still do.
Nintendo's always thrown their weight around.
Mm-hmm. The point is that with the Switch, they seem to lighten up in terms of working with third parties.
Oh, absolutely. But I think the big thing there is that Nintendo came to the conclusion that there are so many third-party games out there that the Switch can play. I mean, it won't be able to play them at the highest settings, unlike on the other erstwhile companions of its generation, or a PC. But there are a lot of people who bought a Nintendo Switch and can't afford a PC, or a PS4 Pro, or an Xbox One X. Which, if you change that to initials, it just spells Xbox again. That was silly and stupid, Microsoft, but whatever. The advantage there is that the Switch is cheaper, it's portable, and it has the ability to play on a screen that is larger than its base screen if you need it to. It's got a lot of adaptation, and it's very flexible and agile, I guess is the best word. Agility is actually something you consider in workflow and everything else. Why not with gaming?
Yeah, just don't abuse the term the way Al Pacino did.
Let's not and say we didn't. So they realized at this point that since their hardware is starting to approach semi-PC levels of hardware. I mean, it is an NVIDIA system on chip that's in there, basically. They realized that third parties can work on that, and it's not really something that's that hard to work on. Most of the games aren't going to take advantage of the touchpad functionality of the screen, but that's fine. Most people don't use the touchpad functionality of the Switch screen that I've seen.
It's there's no intrusive gimmick with the Switch that absolutely has to be implemented. They've already gotten past the era of motion controls and touchpads, so they're just like, all right, we have them if you need them, but you don't need to have them.
Oh,
options.
The only game I can think of that was built around motion controls, and this was really early on in the Switch's lifespan, is ARMS.
It wasn't even built around them. Like, you could play the game ARMS without them. Yeah, the motion controls allowed you to pull some really weird curve punches and stuff, but I got through ARMS on the hardest difficulty using my Switch Pro controller. I didn't use the curving punches at all. It's not necessary. The only other one is the minigame games. I think every Nintendo home console has had its set of minigame games since the Wii. We had Wii Sports.
Like, hey, Wii Sports did good. Let's go ahead and keep doing stuff like that further going down the road.
And it works. It's what gets the casual audience. Of course, then you have weird games like, I'm going to milk a cow. Okay. Thanks. I hate it.
Though.
Hey, you know what? It gave us one of the better moments in HoloLive history, so I can't complain too much.
I mean, I've actually milked a cow for realsies. It is nothing like that game.
I know. I just had to mention that particular moment.
Yes, I know.
I know you know.
Although it could be worse. You could have milked a goat.
No, God.
No. Goats are less calm than cows. No.
That's kind of the point he was making. But that doesn't mean that we've reached the end of the Nintendo gimmicks, because there's been one last major attempt at an accessory gimmick that, well,
and I just realized I just realized that there's one that I forgot that is a parallel to this in terms of sometimes you can have a great idea, but you can give a war and nobody will come. And back in the Wii, you'll recall in the lead up to, I think it was E3 one year, they talked about having this brand new thing that was going to be a big announcement for them, and everybody was speculating, and that big announcement was Wii Music.
And I remember them playing that on stage to the loud roar of crickets.
And the crowd goes mild.
Yeah. Like, this is your big announcement? Oh, lovely. Oh, and we forgot something else, too. We forgot another innovation, another little gimmick that they tried to do during the Wii U era.
What's up?
Actually, yeah, we forgot about that one, too. The balance board, but more specifically, amiibos.
Oh, yes. Another
Stares profusely at my amiibo shelf.
This was
They're
around the
to jump
time
on the collectible figure gimmick that was going on at the time.
The interactive collectible figure that was spurned on by Skylanders.
Spurred, Monk, not spurned.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. I will say that amiibos to me represent something wholly worse than interactive collectibles. This is what we call physical DLC, people.
Especially since there were certain unlocks for some games that you could only get if you had a certain amiibo. like say the top weapon for Link in Hyrule Warriors.
Mm-hmm. I while Coops looks at his amiibo shelf, do you know what I look at? My bag of NFC programmable chips. Don't know what that means out there, everybody? Go look it up. I'm not going to tell you. Just make sure you're wearing your Jolly Roger when you do. Yarhar.
But and the reason this brings us to the one that Shades was leading into, and I find a parallel to Wii Music, and that is Nintendo Labo. Now, I do want to make clear, Nintendo Labo is on its own is not a terrible idea. It's not far removed from, say, the Idea Labs thing that our favorite engineering YouTuber does, John.
Ah, yes. Actually, it's funny you mention him because my wife was just watching one of his videos before the show.
Well, time is as I say many times, it's like poetry. It rhymes and it's a bit gay. But the point is that this whole construct a thing out of cardboard is a very popular building a toy setup for the last few years. The problem was you need, it's a case of reading the room. I remember, you know how there were those cases where you'd have to yell at people during Toku memes about reading the damn room when it came to some of the bad memes.
Yeah.
You have that similar situation here where I realize that Nintendo has their hands in a lot of things, but for a lot of people, they are viewed primarily as a video game company now.
Yeah, it's not like they're a Hanafuda company anymore.
They probably make some in Japan, just nowhere near as much as they may have made a century ago.
Literally a century ago and more.
The point being is that the majority of Nintendo's audience now is a video game audience.
Yep. And
this was a product that should not have been advertised in a video game conference. This should have been advertised instead of at E3. I have a strong suspicion that this would have been much better served if it was advertised at the New York Toy Fair.
But you see, Nintendo doesn't have to worry about that anymore. Nintendo Direct exists.
Mm-hmm.
And on Nintendo Direct, they just announce whatever the fuck they please.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. The Direct model has more or less killed the gaming convention.
Yes, that actually is the final innovation to note from Nintendo. Nintendo Direct, the ability to just stream your own shit whenever the fuck you please, whenever it's good to, whenever your marketing department thinks it's good to stream new announcements and such, which they do a Direct like every other month these days, don't they? For something.
Every few months.
I don't think there's a hard and fast schedule for it.
Yeah, it's like sometimes it's 2 months, sometimes it's 4. There's at least one every quarter. Mm-hmm. And when the rest of the gaming world, all of the main console providers, along with all of the big name producers and developers, looked at what Nintendo was doing, how it freed Nintendo from the convention schedule, how it freed Nintendo to from the costs of going to a convention, because then they just have their own small studio and they throw videos up into a live stream, that saves a shit ton of money, for one. And for two, it allows them to reach their fans whenever they please. And everybody else took a look at that and went, why the fuck aren't we doing that?
And then Devolver Digital happened.
And shortly after that, we got the things like the PlayStation State of Play. I think technically Xbox does its own thing, but it's more just a Microsoft thing in general.
And I know some people will claim that the thing that killed off the gaming convention was the COOF. I don't think that's the case. I think it just accelerated.
Yeah, it accelerated what was already happening. I mean, it was already on its dying days before the coup happened. That just basically put the final bullet in.
As much as Monk and I have torn into Dev of Short Fat Otaku for things that he has said regarding other things, Dev was right when he said that things were going downhill well beforehand, and that the lockdowns just accelerated an already dying beast bleed out.
Keep in mind the year before, E3 did something that nobody would have seen coming, and that was open itself up to the general public. And I had said when that happened, this was going to be the death knell, because the question I had was, what is separating E3 from San Diego Comic-Con or WonderCon or AX? Okay, I might be stretching things by bringing AX into this, but the point is, these were what was separating it from any other convention that was going on. That was already open to the general public.
The fact
absolutely nothing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the fact that it was exclusive was part of what made it desirable for some.
Desirable for some, but I'd say the people who are desirable for are the people who don't have much upstairs, if you catch my drift.
And they certainly don't give a shit about video games.
And I've been in those little circles. Even if I did have a pass, the reason I would never go to one of those again is because I was this close to losing my temper with how condescending so many people in that circle were.
It's the South Park sniffing farts out of wine glasses episode all over again.
Yeah, everybody thinks that was a cute exaggeration. That is not far off from that Bay Area bubble. That's the reason I'm never going back. But
I have to say this, Monk. Don't say you're never going back. We do have to go back to California to save Brother Jeremy.
And shit, you're right.
We have to save him and his family. Is this going to become Escape from LA? I don't think he lives in LA, so I don't think that can apply. But I'm going to use it as a reference anyway. Also, I can wear an eye patch and talk in a rough voice. I am no Kurt Russell, but that's okay.
You sounded more like David Hayter there.
That was the point, Otacon.
Yeah.
No hate to David Hayter. We love him.
How could I not hate how could I put any sort of hatred towards Guyver?
Good point.
That was the good Guyver movie too.
And there's my Toku quota met for the night. But the only people I feel bad for when these conventions went on their way out were a lot of the indies, because conventions are the main way that they get noticed. I think this is the reason why I'm glad at the very least things like Summer of Gaming or Steam Next Fest are things.
Summer Games, Steam Next Fest, Tokyo Game Show, the Game Awards. Even though some of these are shitty ways for shitty people to pat each other on the back, as you all know from our extensive hangover shit shows, we go and we sift through and we pick out the shit y'all ignore, and we force you to see it.
Because if you're gonna keep claiming to me that there's nothing good coming out and the whole industry is fucked, I'm going to be taking that claim and shoving it down your damn throat. Sideways.
He's nice. He's nice. He goes through your mouth. I'd put it up your ass, along with a stick of C4.
Pause.
You've been watching too much ABBA and Preach. Didn't think I knew where that was from, did ya? Huh, Coops?
Nah, it's more if I watch more Boondocks than that, but it makes the same comparison.
True.
What?
But I was more making a boys reference.
Yeah. Next, are you gonna tell me that Stinkmeaner is your spirit animal?
I wish.
His exorcism was freaking epic.
The biggest hater in the universe to the point where even hell found him to be too hateful.
That mean that hell just had one giant nigga moment? Boondocks references.
Oh god, I love that show. Hell, the cartoon or the comic was just as good.
Mm-hmm. But I do. As far as where things are going to go, I know that the rumor mill has sparked up once again about some sort of Switch successor. I do not see that happening for another 5 years minimum.
I actually see it happening sooner rather than later. And the reason for that is that even with the Switch OLED, the power of the internal hardware has just not kept up. Soon enough, due to hardware limitations, the Switch is simply going to hardware itself out of competition. They won't be able to align with third parties anymore because those third parties will be working with ever more powerful hardware. And we have seen the main competitor to the Switch, aka the Steam Deck,
which I own.
I was actually just going to mention that thing has got a lot of power to it.
It's got a lot of power.
It does.
And it can be used as a standalone PC. You just connect it to a monitor, connect your own keyboard and mouse, and it becomes a computer. Not to mention, it runs all the Steam Deck compatible games off Steam. That's the name. And I do have to take this time to bring up the fact that in the area of Washington Gabe Newell lives in, he was handing out those Steam Decks himself. Which is fucking great, because Gabe Newell is... You may cry when he reaches his hand sultrily into your wallet and pulls out all of your hard-earned shekels. But you thank him every day. But you thank him every day for being the wholesome and great man that he is.
Praise Lord Gaben.
Praise Lord Gaben!
Plus, he gave me the one quote that I keep throwing at everybody when they try and do the shaming tactic regarding... the piracy boogeyman.
It is a service issue. Deal with it,
yep.
motherfuckers. But I see them having to at least upgrade the Switch hardware, making maybe a Switch Pro version. Not necessarily a sequel to the Switch, but a Switch with better hardware. Which may include a different dock and everything, because it'll likely have to be thicker. To fit a better main board. As for an actual Switch successor, that might be a few years after that. I don't even know if they'll continue to make it a handheld. There are a lot of people that use the Switch handheld, but there are also a lot of people who don't. They may go back to making a separate handheld and home console again. Especially considering that they recently shut down the eShop for Wii U and 3DS back in March. RIP eShop. And then, like bastards, sent a system update to every fucking 3DS over a month after closing the eShop just to update it so that it made it harder to put custom firmware on the 3DS because they're afraid of piracy. When most people who use custom firmware on the 3DS do it for things that are not related to piracy, myself included. Fuck you! I'm never updating my 3DS. It will be on 11.16-56U forever. Suck my dick, Nintendo.
Yeah, this is where I feel we do have to get into the elephant in the room, and that has been Nintendo's attitude regarding fan games.
Fan games, homebrew, custom firmware. Nintendo loves to innovate. They don't like it when you innovate on their innovations.
And they definitely don't like it when you innovate YouTube videos playing their games.
No, definitely not. Though, you know what's funny?
Nothing better about that.
For the company that has the most hatred for, custom homebrew, they seem to be the consoles that's the easiest to homebrew.
That's probably due to the fact that, frankly, it's due to the limitations of the hardware, actually. The hardware on a PlayStation 4 Pro or an Xbox One X, which those are the contemporaries of the Switch. The Switch is not in the same generation as the PS5 or the whatever they're calling the next Xbox I don't give a shit about. The hardware is simpler. I mean, remember that the launch version Switches, which I have one of, can, with a small piece of plastic or metal cut into a specific jig placed into, I believe it's the right Joy-Con bay, cause the Switch to boot into its safety mode, which allows you to to dual boot Linux on it. And there you go. You've homebrewed your Switch. Don't ask me how to actually do it. You do so at your own peril. Mm-hmm. And there are guides for that elsewhere on the interwebs and Discord servers. But you'll look them up yourself. But yes, Nintendo's view on how it controls its IP is frankly more draconic than anybody besides Games Workshop.
Yeah, I'd say that. I think the reason that stuff like Reclaim the Wild and PTU and Pokeroll haven't gotten this issue is because the idea of a tabletop indie game is so small potatoes that it's not worth their attention.
Mm-hmm. And they haven't really been able to C&D a lot of ROM hacks for some reason, such as Pokemon Uranium.
I get.
They shut down Uranium.
Uranium still gets passed around like candy.
I think it's a case of a cockroach thing. They try to stamp it out, but the problem is once it's entered that level of circulation, it is all but impossible to stamp out every version of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Same with AM2R.
Which is why I say keep copying and distributing, so we can keep watching them squirm.
I will say though that in regards to YouTube videos, they have been letting up on them a lot recently.
I look at that as more of a case of there's no equivalent to fair use in Japan.
No, there isn't, but YouTube is an American company.
Yeah, because they weren't the only ones who were pulling this shit of trying to take down even music channels that just had music tracks.
Oh, they got that one taken down a long time ago.
But the point being, the these particular areas, it's a case where they tried throwing their weight around on this thing in the name of protecting IP, which I know I've made the joke before, but I keep getting reminded of that age-old thing of burning down a forest to prevent loggers. Which, if that sounds redundant, that's the joke. That's the joke.
You suck, big monk.
Bada, 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 bada. And that's one of the better use of firearms, because I'm never forgiving the Simpsons for that crime against firearms they pulled of putting in a clip into a revolver.
I think in that case, that was a joke.
It still makes me hurt.
It was supposed to.
But I'd say with all of that, we've exhausted all we could when it comes to Nintendo's good, bad, and ugly when it comes to innovation. And that is going to do it for this particular episode of GeekWatch. We will be back here. We'll be back here next week. I do have a few interviews that I have planned for this week. One of these days, I need to set up a some sort of schedule image like a lot of VTubers do, so I can make things easier on myself. I just need to find a template so that I can actually do it. But of course, Thursday and Friday will be the usual return of the Valley of the Judge, covering Valhalla and Planetbound respectively. And
if you listen closely, you can hear Brother Jeremy cheering in the distance.
Yeah, because John, you know how Alex Abrahantes is the hype man for the Lucha Bros?
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like Jeremy is becoming our hype man.
He's been hyping us pretty well,
which is a good problem to have, and I'm certainly grateful for it. I just have to make the joke. But like I said, we will be back here next week with something different, and of course, in later this month will be the return of the Parliament of Geeks, covering the Tatami Galaxy and all of its insanity. So please look forward to it, in the words of Yoshi P. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra, I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.